about the First Amendment.
Oh my God. You see, this is
he's suing a pollster.
I'm so tired of leftists just coming to these conclusions as far as I can look inside his head and I know better than anyone exactly what Trump is really thinking, even though I've seen policy after policy that is issued that has had nothing to do whatsoever with reaching the conclusions I've reached. I'm still going to come out here and tell you, I know what he's thinking. He doesn't care about the First Amendment. He doesn't care about due process. He only cares about himself. You can see one piece of evidence after another about this, and you're going to come out there and you're going to say to yourself, oh no, I know better than you. Everyone else. Why? Because I'm sitting here on the outside. Even though I've been tilted and I've come across him every single way, I'm going to look at any way I possibly can to frame it against him.
There is no other explanation. There is no other explanation. If they thought it was because of his criminal conduct, they would say so. If they thought it was, and now they have this bullshit pretext about after the fact
what they
that
said was, let's look at what they did say. What they said was that we consider him a national security issue. What is this proper procedure to do under that issue, under that setting? And the proper procedure is laid out in the APA that I started with, that you wanted to just jump away from. The APA and the steps that they were actually taking was saying we're going to process him through an administrative immigration judge, and he's going to examine this to make sure that we are not just capturing him, throwing a bag over his head, and
like they're doing with the Venezuelans. Like they're doing with the Venezuelans, yes?
I don't know.
Like they're doing with the Venezuelans, not even giving them the opportunity to file habeas petitions.
What I'm saying,
it's disgusting. You're defending this regime.
Habeas petitions are not. You're not entitled to a habeas petition the moment you get arrested.
The DC Circuit Court of Appeals said.
You're mistaken. Supreme Court does not allow you to just automatically get a habeas petition. You cannot get it under 1252G, I believe. You cannot go to the federal district court until such time as you've exhausted all your administrative process.
They said we didn't even need to send these people that were throwing bags over their heads, going to the tarmac and trying to get them off the plane before the court opens. They said we don't even need to, in court, by the way, they said we don't even need to tell their lawyers where they're at. We don't even need to give them notice of the basis of their removal.
You're making
the fact that you would defend this criminal regime and say Trump cares about rights, it's the most preposterous thing I've ever heard.
Okay, so let's come to a conclusion here. So you agree that Mahmoud Khalil, everything's fine. Now you want to move on to the
No. I just want to be clear, because what I'm telling to Tim, I think I saw some nodding there from Tim. I wanted to see if you agree. Because you saw
the nodding was the Israel stuff.
Well, it seems like that is what he's trying to do. He's trying to signal 100%.
So, but I'll clarify too, because one thing that frustrates me is there are I call them the Jews people, where they think everything's the Jews all the time. I think this is purely related to American foreign policy. I think this country wants to fund its foreign military operations. Israel's a strong ally. The U.S. wants to give them money, wants to be involved, wants military there. I don't think it's the Jews. I think it's a strategic location for U.S. Middle Eastern operations. And you've got these protests that are emerging and influence spreading across universities, which are counter to American foreign policy interests, largely that I disagree with. So I do think Trump is trying to send a message. That's why Romesa, I believe her name was.
Yep.
Ozturk, she had her visa revoked. I believe it was presumably based on a pro-Palestinian paper that was written. Now, that doesn't go to the question of whether or not they have the legal right to do it, but I think the motivation strongly has to do with
they're posting the Studio Ghibli of them deporting people. They're posting ASMR.
But I'll just real quick.
I don't know, that's a little different because it's not the Israel issue.
I just want to say, because we talked about this last night, that's a fentanyl dealer.
And I understand, but the whole purpose is to send signals.
I think Trump is trying to trick the left by doing that into defending one of the most
I'll defend reprehensible people if it means defending our rights. Right now, I'll absolutely.
But that's the point.
You're not defending our rights.
I am defending our rights.
No, it's not our rights.
Yes, it is.
Unless you're here via green card or visa, you're not defending our rights. You are defending the rights that America decides to confer on people who are not citizens of her nation.
But you just agreed that Mahmoud Khalil has First Amendment rights. You just said...
I said they are limited First Amendment rights.
What is the First Amendment? What kind of rights would it be that, okay, you have rights, but you can't say what we want you to say, otherwise we'll throw you out of the country?
Well, let me
that a right?
I have an honest question.
I'll tell you. I'll answer. Can I answer his question?
Yeah.
How is that a right? It's a right in that he's not sitting in a prison. And I don't want him... And if
he's sitting in a jail right now.
No, what I'm saying is that's a detention waiting for processing...
Cold comfort.
What's cold comfort?
Cold comfort for his wife, who is now 8 months pregnant and didn't even know where he was, and obviously and has a kid on the way, and is trying to get information from the administration on where he is.
I have a question for you guys. The Constitution applies to non-citizens.
Yes.
The Bill of Rights do. Can they buy guns? As honest question. I don't know if they can.
I think the Second Amendment, as interpreted by this court, I don't necessarily agree that
Do it.
Wait.
Do it.
I don't
Do it.
Wait. Whoa. Listen. Second Amendment.
Tell me they can buy guns.
Second Amendment.
That's right. Load them up.
The Second Amendment is based. And listen, and I don't necessarily agree with the court's interpretation as applied in Heller and in the follow-on case McDonald, but that is the precedent of the Supreme Court, and it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's people. In the same logic that would protect non-citizens with respect to searches and seizures, which would protect them for torture, right? You agree that the government can't inflict cruel and unusual punishment to illegal immigrants. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
So,
do you agree with that, yes or no?
That they can't torture illegal.
They can't torture illegal immigrants, right?
I agree with that.
Okay. And so you also agree that they can't be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, right? Fair?
That's due process.
Okay. So why would they not be protected by the Second Amendment?
Yeah. I mean, yes. We've bumped into this one quite a bit because, I've known for some time that the Constitution applies to all peoples here. And the reason that it does, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the Fourth Amendment didn't, there'd be no Fourth Amendment. They'd be able to say, we just think you're not a citizen, so now we're going to raid your house.
Yeah.
So no. You can't raid someone's house just because
you're not a citizen.
Yeah, because the protection is for an individual, not the interpretation of whether they're here legally or not. And so the question then comes to guns, because Second Amendment says the people. So I'm like, can illegal immigrants buy guns in this country?
So
I want everybody.
You're saying when it says the people, that's a limitation that carves out. Mm-hmm. So you're saying because that the Second Amendment says. I never really considered Tim's question before. I think it's an interesting question.
And think about the recent precedent.
I need to explain to you where I'm coming from with respect to this, with respect to illegal aliens, because I do believe very firmly that our Constitution, when we're first forming our government, our founders have in mind, why do we have a government in the first place? It's in order to help facilitate and secure the safety of our people. But we have this grave concern, and that concern is very obvious based on history, that once you put a government in power, however that government is run, whether it's democracy or something else, that invariably they're going to crush the people. So we're going to set up not a democracy, which we're not at all a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, and that constitution will safeguard the individual from the powers that this group of individuals has given the government. And the reason we have this government here is to basically keep those citizens safe from outsiders, so we don't have
sounds like a liberal
bans.
Justice, because what you're saying is there's a general purpose for general welfare.
What I'm saying is
I'm going to interpret these words however I want.
I'm switching into the constitutional theory, not based on like this case here or that statute there. I'm just analyzing now. I asked you in the beginning, let's talk about the law. We explored that for 30 minutes. Now at this point, I'm talking to you as far as constitutional.
We haven't run to ground. We haven't run to ground. I want to know if Tim Pool agrees that this deportation is legitimate, or whether you're going to say you're agnostic about it. I want to know whether you think that this attempted deportation is okay to do or not.
I think it's okay to do.
Why do you think it's okay to do?
I think that this is the next question I was getting into as pertains to the Constitution. The idea that we're going to try and interpret the Constitution, to me, has become largely meaningless outside of the initial 7 articles. The construction of government makes a lot of sense. People often say, they'll say what Trump is doing or what Biden is doing is unconstitutional. They're usually referring to the Bill of Rights, which have never been universally understood ever. For instance, blasphemy and obscenity were illegal. Literally after they ratified the Constitution, you walked outside and screamed obscenities, you'd be arrested, literally arrested. George Carlin was arrested in the 70s for swearing. Like there was no universal.
There have been bad times in our history where we have not been true to the Constitution.
No, but
John Adams passed the Sedition Acts, where it literally was a crime to insult the president. All right,
so and then it got pulled back.
Correct.
So my point is, as it pertains to the Second Amendment, our current understanding is a complete inversion from every different period throughout various generations of different moral worldviews. Notably with DC versus Heller and then McDonald v. Chicago is when we started to get the actual, you can actually have guns. So it was surprising to me to actually learn this in the past few years, because I didn't really pay attention to the gun stuff. But I looked at the map of the right to keep and bear arms pre-Heller didn't exist in this country despite a Second Amendment. You could have a dismantled, broken up piece of guns throughout your house, but it was actually legal for a state to deny you a permit to carry, deny you a permit to own, and require you to dismantle it in your own house.
Initially, the Bill of Rights did not apply us to the states. The Bill of Rights were a framework to apply to the federal government. And so that's why there's that proviso.
It only affected D.C.
It only affected D.C. And so for the longest time, there was no incorporation, is the term called, of the Second Amendment. That's why McDonald's is a case that incorporates it through the due process clause. But I want to push you a little bit there, because it sounds like what you're suggesting is there's nothing Trump could do, because this is all mushy, it's all woozy, it's all wazzy. There have been times where we disrespected, that there's nothing Trump could do where you would say, I don't like that because of the First Amendment. Is that true?
Let me ask you, is it constitutional to...
Wait, could you answer that question first? Well, I asked you, you were kind of like saying,
ask the question.
Yeah, the First Amendment, it's all, we never respected it anyway. Who cares about it? That's kind of what...
Who cares?
Okay, but
I'll tell you something.
What would it take that for Trump to do where you would say, okay, because of the First Amendment, this shit is fucked up and I'm going to call him out for on the First Amendment grounds? Is there anything he could do where you would call him out for First Amendment grounds?
So the presupposition there that I have an issue with is First Amendment grounds. I think the real question is moral grounds. And I don't care about the Constitution. I care if he's doing something wrong. So even if the Constitution allows him to be evil, I'm going to call him out for being evil, if it's Trump, Biden, or otherwise.
And if the Constitution says something, for example, that says, for example, because you don't care about the Constitution, he can't
I
run.
do care about the Constitution.
But you only care about the non-rights portions of the Constitution?
My point was the Bill of Rights have been applied by those in whatever way they interpret. And then when it gets challenged to the courts reinterpret or interpret in whatever way they
care about the constitutional rights or not?
Absolutely.
So if you care about the constitutional rights, don't you care?
As I interpret them.
As you interpret them.
And you interpret them differently.
I interpret them differently. But
for example, is it cruel and unusual punishment to put a male person in a female prison?
For whom?
For either.
I think that it could be if you can show, for example,
could be. We have a problem right now.
We
don't have a definitive understanding.
So it depends, because you're going to need to do research on these constitutional principles to see, to what extent is it the danger to the person that you're putting in the female prison. As I understand it, there's not an epidemic of abuse from trans people in female prisons to the female individuals. That the more likely situation. Wait. As I understand,
I'm not trying to open that issue for debate. The point of contention was
it's a difficult issue.
Exactly. Yeah. There's an Eighth Amendment, and we actually don't know how to apply it to certain issues affecting us.
Here we have something clear. Right? Here we have something clear. You think if an American citizen did what Mahmoud Khalil did, do you think that he should be able to go to jail under the First Amendment?
If he was occupying a building, yes.
No, put that aside, because we have to put that aside, because the government's not alleging that, right? So if all that's being alleged is an American...
He leafleted for Al-Aqsa flood.
Okay, an American citizen can do that, right?
Indeed.
And if Trump threw an American citizen in jail or said that you can't get a liquor license because you did that, something that's perfectly constitutional, would you call him out for First Amendment violations?
Yes.
So the only difference here is whether or not he's a resident alien or whether he's an American. That's really the only difference.
Absolutely.
But you just agreed, didn't you, that resident aliens have First Amendment rights?
No.
And as he pointed out, they're limited, and that's why I asked the question about guns and cruel and unusual punishment.
You agreed in the guns context. You said, of course, it's natural that you have gun rights. And so it seems like you're granted in the guns right. In fact, that's a hot take, and it's one that I respect you for. But why won't you grant it in the First Amendment context?
Like I already mentioned, we could not sit here and define what cruel and unusual punishment is as per the Eighth Amendment. So you're going to assert there are certain... So the argument really just boils down to my moral worldview. That's the issue I take with the Bill of Rights and how we interpret them. As you guys are all citing legal precedent, saying the court said this and the court said that, I'm sitting here being like, the only thing that really matters is whether the majority body politic determines it to be moral or not. So, for instance, when it was a predominantly Christian nation, if you blasphemed, you'd find yourself in jail. If you went in public and started cussing and swearing, you'd find yourself in jail. But as we've shifted away from that moral worldview, you can now go on television and cuss up a storm like South Park did, counting how many times they swore on TV. These things change dramatically. Right now, as a society, we don't know. You've got the conservatives saying, and I use this because it's obviously a hot button issue. A judge just ruled that Trump must return two biological male individuals to a woman's prison. Women there are upset. And liberal activists say putting transgender individuals who are undergoing, who are affirmed, HRT, in a male prison is cruel and unusual to them. Conservatives argue the inverse. There's not going to be an accepted moral worldview between the two political factions in this country on that issue.
But I just want to take an issue with the premise there, because you said what ultimately is going to be protected by these rights is going to be determined by the body politic. I think that's crucially misunderstanding the purpose of the rights. These rights are meant to apply as to the majority.
I know.
The reason that they're so difficult to get rid of is because it's supposed to be protection against the excesses of a majority. And there's some ANCAPs or anarcho-style people here that I met who sound like really nice people, and they understand this, right? And if you're an anarcho-capitalist, you understand this. this, that there are abuses that the majority of the public can do. And the rights are to stand in contradiction to what general sentiment is and to say, no, even if Congress wants to, right? Congress shall make no law. So even if Congress would like to violate the First Amendment rights of Mahmoud Khalil, they can't. That's what the First Amendment is meant to protect. And they have,
over and over again, they violated every.
Don't we have a requirement, just like in the Second Amendment context? And you think the Second Amendment is important. No. Wasn't it important for the Supreme Court to say, in your view, that there is an individual right here associated with gun?
What does infringe mean?
Infringe?
Yeah.
It's going to be it's going to be different.
The right to keep and bear arms has been infringed every possible way, and we're supposed to sit here and say we have a Second Amendment. We don't. The First Amendment, they've made. How many laws are on the books pertaining to speech, religion, or otherwise? There's a ridiculous amount of them.
But is that just an excuse not to ever think about the First Amendment?
No. It's a moral, philosophical point that this country tolerates what violates the Constitution if it applies to the majority, and that's not correct.
There are clear cases and there are unclear cases, right? There's a clear case of Second Amendment violation that says no, every gun ownership, that's a crime. You would say that's a clear case that reasonable minds can't disagree about. Or you're
arguing extremes instead of what we're actually doing.
No, but what I'm saying, but your framework where you're saying, well, who knows because the Congress is always violated, that's an excuse to never apply the principle, even in clear cases. And here we have a clear case where you acknowledge that the First Amendment as to citizens would protect this conduct. And in fact, you would criticize Trump if he went after citizens for doing this conduct. You've also accepted, I think, as a maxim or as a general principle that resident aliens do have First Amendment rights. And so why does that not follow? Why doesn't it?
I mean, I'd like to have...
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Well, let me make one more point on this.
Yeah.
The reason I asked the question about a black man going into a bakery, the baker can say to him, I'm sorry, look, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. Goodbye. And what can you really do? Often in these circumstances, individuals who feel aggrieved will sue anyway, and they'll often win, even if it actually isn't the case that the person was discriminated against based on race. The issue then becomes to be racist, simply just don't admit you are. So what we have here is the INA allows them to deport Mahmoud Khalil. And so I shrug and say, change the law if you have an issue with it. But for the time being, there's nothing else to be done.
So if they said national security threat because he's a Muslim, we're deporting him, would you say the same thing?
That's the point I made about the bakery.
So would you say
no.
that? Why wouldn't you?
So this is the problem with the law as it is written. I completely think it is screwed up and makes no sense. It results in people who are not racist being accused of racist and racists actually getting away with things they're not supposed to be able to get away with. So this is New York City has human rights law that protects 31 identifiable genders. It defines in their human rights code, gender identity is self-expression. Mm-hmm. So I called a human rights lawyer, 3 of them actually in New York. And I said, I'm trying to get an understanding of how this law would actually be applied. It says that the clothing you wear, the name you call yourself, you cannot be discriminated against in public accommodation based on these characteristics. They all agreed, yes. I had the law in front of me. I said, so if there is a clearly identifiable biological male wearing a dress with lipstick on who calls himself Susan and says he's a her, they cannot discriminate. This person gets hired for a job. They're allowed to wear female clothing. Absolutely. I said, okay, what if someone dresses up in a fursuit, a furry, and they refer to themselves as Vociferon, Herald of the Winter Mists? I'm intentionally making it
absurd. Yeah. Right.
They all said the courts would laugh that out of the courtroom. You'd never get through. They would fire you in 2 seconds. I said, why is a judge allowed to laugh at an individual's identity that the law supposedly protects? And they said, because the judges can interpret as they see fit. And I said, then there may as well be no law at all.
I know, but that's the conclusion there. That can't be right? Because what you're saying is then judges can't interpret the provision of the INA.
A judge is going to laugh at a trans person.
Okay, but then you're not stating your position. You're just stating basically it's a real fact that judges are going to do what judges are going to do.
My position is this will go to a hearing, and the INA gives Secretary of State the right to deport, and I don't see any reason why they can't do that. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.